So I'm starting a new business from scratch based on a concept I had for a new type of pet carrier for cats and small dogs. And this business is going to be primarily an e-commerce business that I'm going to sell pet carriers through my online store. Now for the past 2 months, I've been going through the process of product design, refining the design of this new type of pet carrier. And now I finally moved into the prototype manufacturing stage. So I paid for my prototype to be manufactured, and I'm waiting for that to be completed and delivered to me. So to provide an update on where things currently stand with the business, I'm going to walk through my financial statements to date and provide a little look at some of the market research that I've done on pet carriers in response to some of the questions that I've received from people saying why pet carriers, and also to address some general skepticism that I've received from people wondering whether or not it's actually possible to make money selling something like pet carriers. First of all, here's the spreadsheet with my current financial statements up to date, including every expense that I've had so far. And as you can see, my revenue is currently sitting at nil, of course, because I'm still in the prototype manufacturing phase and I don't have a product to sell yet. But if you look down here, these are my total expenses. And I'm gonna scroll down so you can see. I've had some relatively significant expenses over the past couple months. So this first item here was just me going to the pet store and buying an existing pet carrier, a cat carrier, so that I could mess around with it and cut it up a little bit and see if my concept would actually work in theory. And once I confirmed that, then I made 2 payments here for product design. So I paid in 2 installments, once upon signing the contract and then once upon completion of the product design. And that product design process was relatively expensive, totaling $8,300, give or take, and took quite a while, probably around 2 months from start to finish. And that went from a 2D design with several different iterations, then moved to a 3D design, and now finally we're in the prototype manufacturing phase, and I've paid so far $3,700 for that prototype to be manufactured and shipped to me, which now I am just waiting for. And the final expense on the list here is the domain name registration, which I've registered 2 domain names for my online store, which shall be revealed at a later date. But my total expenses so far for this business are $12,172.75, meaning that my net income is exactly that much in the negative. So $12,175 is obviously a considerable sum of money. And these are all upfront costs here that may or may not actually lead to sales and revenue and then potentially profit down the line. So I'm taking a pretty considerable risk here by putting all this money up front and trying to develop a product. And this type of business, I feel like, is a little bit riskier than some other types of businesses like dropshipping or service-based businesses where you don't have to put so much capital up front. But when you have an idea for a new type of product and you need to go through the entire, set of processes from designing and then manufacturing the prototypes and then testing the prototypes and trying to bring a concept to a point where you actually have a legitimate product that people will potentially want to buy. It's a lengthy process and obviously it costs a decent amount of money. So yeah, it's very much uncertain at this point if this is actually going to turn into a profitable venture for me or if this is going to be a very expensive lesson. But either way, I'm really curious to see what comes of this. And at this point, I do still believe in the product and I do believe that it has potential. So we'll see where it goes. Now moving to the topic of market research. Like I said, I've received a number of questions from friends, family, and just outside observers that are wondering, A, why did I decide to focus on pet carriers for this new business? And B, that might be expressing some skepticism about whether or not it's actually possible to make money selling pet carriers. The answer to the first question, why pet carriers, is because that's just the idea that I was struck with at one certain point and I decided to pursue it. And you can spend a very, very long time waiting for the perfect idea of the best new business to start. But I realized that the perfect is the enemy of the good. And in this instance, I thought I had a reasonable idea for something that could be a legitimate product that people want to buy. So I decided to pursue it. And the answer to the second question, which is whether or not it's possible to actually make money or make a living selling something like a pet carrier, is that I think it is possible to make money and to make a living selling practically anything if you have a good product and a good marketing strategy. But here is a quick summary of some market research that I've found that shows how large the pet industry in North America actually is, how fast it's growing, and some interesting demographic trends that I could use to help me when I'm developing my own marketing strategies. In terms of the size of the pet industry globally, it's a huge, huge market. And this here shows you that it's currently sitting at around $232 billion, but is projected to grow quite significantly to around $350 billion by 2027. Now, I know what you're probably saying at this point, which is that you can't use these large abstract figures because I am talking about a specific niche product in a specific segment of the overall pet industry. So I do fully recognize that. I'm going to get into that in a few seconds. In terms of the US market though, which is probably going to be my primary focus along with Canada and potentially the European Union, depending on how complicated it is to ship to Europe, there is a significant market here. So we're talking about $99 billion last year for the overall pet industry. And now this graph here, interestingly, breaks that down. So if you separate out food and veterinary bills or pet care and things like that, and you focus solely on supplies, we're talking about $20 billion. So again, narrowing it down quite significantly from that global figure, but still a pretty significant, pool of money with which we're working. To narrow down the focus even further, let's take a look at this graph right here, which shows the leading categories for online or e-commerce sales in the US for specific types of products. And as you can see, pet supplies comes in at number 2 with $5.65 billion. So that is probably a much more accurate representation of just the general market that I'm working with. Of course, it would be great to have that separated out into specifically pet carriers from all the other types of supplies. But even assuming that it's a small percentage of that, then I still have a very significant market size to work with. Now this graph here is something that I find extremely telling, and it's definitely going to inform my strategy and why I'm going to focus mainly on e-commerce rather than on retail. But here you can see the percentage of households that are purchasing pet products from retail outlets as opposed to online stores. And the growth for the online sales is just, exponential compared to retail sales. So this is an interesting statistic for me to keep in mind, and it probably means that I'm going to focus much more heavily on my e-commerce business as opposed to going out and knocking on doors and trying to get my product into places like PetSmart or Pet Value and things like that. In terms of demographics and who I should be targeting for my marketing strategy with this new pet carrier, this graph here shows the percentage of pet owners broken into different generational groups. And as you can see, millennials and Gen X are now the vast majority of pet owners, which is good for me to know because the pet carrier that I've designed is pretty sleek, pretty modern, and it has a really unique new feature that is kind of different from all pet carriers that you've probably seen in the past. And so that is something that I think would have higher adoption rates among younger people as opposed to people in the baby boom generation. And so this is sort of validating my strategy to A, have a mainly e-commerce business strategy, and B, to target my marketing material to millennials and Gen Xers. I think just with a lot of the free material that I found out there, I validated that there is a significant market size for this type of product. And also one other interesting thing that I found while I was doing my research is that the pet industry is kind of recession proof because people obviously love their pets and they're willing to spend money on their pets regardless of what the economic climate is. And so even when things are not necessarily doing great in terms of the pandemic and job losses and everything like that, the pet market still seems like a pretty good place to be. And in 2020, there was significant increases in the number of pets adopted and the amount of money that was being spent on pets. So really, it does feel like a pretty good time to be getting into this industry. That is all for today's update. I'm hoping that pretty soon I can actually reveal the pet carrier itself. And that is just pending the application of some patents that I'm hoping to file. But once I do that, then I'll feel comfortable posting on the internet, some of the design process that I've gone through. And then once I get my actual prototype, I'm super excited to show that and then to talk about what my plans are for the next steps, which is mainly going to revolve around shooting a promotional video and then trying to launch a Kickstarter campaign where I can potentially get some sales and then use that money to develop the molds that I'll need to manufacture this product in a mass manufacturing facility somewhere. And so that's it for today's update. Again, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content and you want to see more about entrepreneurship, personal finance, investing, and just life in general, Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.